All right, now we're going to go through the nervous system and understand that organization a little bit better so that we can understand how we're actually getting muscles to contract and get movement going. All right, so first let's just try to draw this a little bit. Let's put the nervous system, I'll just put NS here. The nervous system can be divided into different parts. Here we can put the CNS, central nervous system, and then this can be further divided to the PNS, the peripheral nervous system. And then we can further divide this out into two different pathways. We can call one of them the afferent pathway, or the sensory. Okay, and then the other one would be the efferent. Now we continue going. The afferent, so sensory ones, and then the efferent, which means you're sending signals to wherever it needs to go. So the efferent is really your, we can say your motor nervous system. Let's put NS, your motor nervous system. And we can divide this one out even further, okay? So for example, we can take here and we can say you have your somatic, motor neurons. All right, and then you can have different somatic motor neurons. You can have, for example, your alpha motor neurons. And you could also have your gamma motor neurons. Now, what do your alpha motor neurons do? These ones control your skeletal muscle, right? So I'll just do that backwards, skeletal muscle. And these ones are going to be extrafusal fibers. Extrafusal fibers. And this one is going to be your intrafusal fibers. Intrafusal fibers. Okay, so basically we're talking about your spindles, your muscle spindles, okay? So that's just somatic motor neurons. Now we also, there's other efferent motor neurons that can be subdivided. We have your ANS. That's your autonomic nervous system. Now the ANS can be further subdivided into different categories. Okay, so for example, we have your parasympathetic. Oh, we'll put an S in there. Parasympathetic system, and then you have your sympathetic system. And then you have, of course, another one that's not so obvious. We don't talk about it very much. This is actually called the enteric system. All right. Okay. Now, let's talk about it a little bit. So parasympathetic, of course, that's your rest and digest, slow things down. And so that's going to control a lot of different tissues, like slowing your heart rate down. Your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, that's going to innervate a lot of these tissues, like your heart, speeding your heart rate up. We talked about that earlier. So these are going to come onto different, I'm trying to make it simple here. We'll just say various tissues, right? And then your enteric system, this is mainly to do with like your GI tract. Okay, your GI tract. And that's because you have hundreds of millions of neurons in your GI tract. It's called your second brain for a reason. The gut-brain axis, all of that is sort of connected, right? So that's the enteric system, sort of a subdivision of the autonomic nervous system. And now these all sort of can influence one another, right? Of course, like these innervations here of the ANS could influence like some of your skeletal muscles. And then you want to sense some of this stuff too, right? You have receptors. So all of these right here, you do have receptors. I'll do a different color. You do have receptors in all of these, in your tissues, and we'll just put here receptors, because you have neurons that are sensing all of that. They're sensing they're sensory neurons. These sensory neurons are these guys right here, your afferent sensory system, right? And so they're carrying that message to your brain, right? They're the PNS, and then on down over here to your brain, so you can figure out what's going on. So you have this entire loop, so everything is able to communicate and make sense, right? So now what we want to talk about though is how are we going to move? When our brain says, hey, we want to move, we're going to have an interneuron that's going to go on, and that's going to send a signal to the PNS, well, through the PNS, right, through an efferent motor neuron, to a somatic motor neuron, and then finally to the alpha motor neuron. And so in order to do that, it does that with action potentials. And action potentials are required and use a resting membrane potential. So let's go through resting membrane potential and talk about action potentials so we can understand how is it that we are actually moving our muscles and finally going to the calcium cross-bridge cycling.